Today we're gonna take an in-depth look at how leads have evolved over the generations in Smeargle OU competitive singles. A lead, of course, is the Pokémon you send out at the start of the battle. In generations 1 through 4, leads played a crucial role as you had to choose a dedicated Pokémon to start every match with, resulting in a very defined lead metagame. However, starting in Generation 5, the introduction of Team Preview drastically changed how leads functioned, allowing for much more variety in lead choices. In generations with Team Preview, leads are not that defined, but there is a certain style of Pokemon leads that wants to get KO'd quickly as possible. I don't think YouTube would appreciate me calling them by their actual term, so let's call these Pokemon speedrun unalive leads. That rolls off the tongue quite nicely, I would say. Now let's take a look at which Pokemon were commonly used as leads in each generation and why they were chosen. BYOU has a very defined lead metagame because of the absurd sleep mechanics in the generation. Sleep is very broken in Gen 1 as your Pokemon can stay asleep for up to 7 turns and Pokemon cannot move on the turn they wake up. Not to mention there is no way to remove the sleep status, there is no sleep talk either, so this Pokemon will most likely be useless for the entirety of the match. Paralysis spreading is also very common in Gen 1, so putting something to sleep as early as possible is very advantageous in this metagame. Jinx is a premier lead in the RBYOU metagame as it has great traits that makes it consistently threatening to any team. It has the 75% accurate Lovely Kiss to put something to sleep very early on, and the only Pokemon that can outspeed it and has a sleep move is Gengar, making it a very reliable lead. Jinx can also KO Gengar with a Psychic if Gengar's Hypnosis misses and if Jinx gets a critical hit. And the critical hit is quite common because in Gen 1 the crit rate is based on your speed. So the higher your speed, the higher the crit rate. It also has Blizzard, a very strong move. Ice type moves are very strong in this generation. So having Stab Blizzard with that 120 base power, 90% accuracy is very difficult to switch into, especially because of the freeze chance. If you get frozen in Gen 1, your Pokemon will stay frozen for the entirety of the match unless you get hit by a fire move, which are not used at all in the metagame. Jinx is also a great sleep absorber thanks to its Ice Psychic typing and high special stat. Ice and Psychic are very common and strong attacking types in the metagame, so having a resistance to both of those is quite nice. Offensively, this Pokemon is also super difficult to switch into thanks to its high critical hit rate, high special stat, and its Ice Psychic offensive typing. Next up we got Gengar. Gengar is a very high risk, high reward lead. It is the fastest Pokemon with a sleep move. However, Hypnosis is only 60% accurate. Gengar also has access to Explosion, a very strong move in Gen 1. It's effectively 340 base power. Even with Gengar's low attack stat, that will still deal a lot of damage. Gengar is also the only ghost type in the metagame, so it can absorb opposing explosions and also the abundance of normal type moves. This also makes it a great sleep absorber itself. It has Thunderbolt to threaten Starmie leads. However, Starmie can also threaten Gengar with a Psychic, so it's not always the most reliable answer. Gengar's poison typing, however, does leave it weak to not only psychic attacks but also ground attacks, which a lot of normal types do carry as coverage. But Gengar is nonetheless a good lead. Alakazam is the best sleep absorber in the metagame and it's also a very consistent lead. It has Thunder Wave, so it's a very good paralysis spreader at the start of the game. It also has a very safe matchup versus Gengar leads as it can threaten them with Psychic. However, Alakazam does struggle against Executor leads as it cannot do a lot aside from Thunder Wave and Parahex its way through. Seismic Toss thus gives it a great matchup against opposing Psychic types like the aforementioned Executor and Starmie. Alakazam's great speed, special stat, and Psychic typing makes it a very consistent lead, can do a lot of damage, can spread paralysis safely, can absorb sleep quite well. However, spreading paralysis at the start of the game can be a little disadvantageous if your opponents predicts it and switches in their Chansey. You would rather sleep or freeze a Chansey, so if it gets paralyzed early on in the metagame, it will be invulnerable to those status effects. Paralyzing still can be advantageous to you, but you have to play more aggressively in that case. Starmie is a very similar lead to Alakazam, but it does have some notable differences. First, its water typing gives it a valuable resistance to ice attacks. Starmie also has Blizzard itself, which gives it the great combination of ice and psychic coverage, which is very difficult to switch into, as we mentioned earlier with Jinx. Just like Alakazam, it has Thunder Wave and Recover. However, what separates Starmie even more is having access to Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt allows it to threaten both opposing Starmie leads, but also Slowbro switch-ins. Also, Blizzard gives it a great matchup versus Executor, a Pokemon that Alakazam struggles with most of the time. Blizzard also gives it a better matchup against Alakazam leads. Lastly, Starmie is quite versatile. Even with those options we just mentioned, it can also use more niche options like Surf and Hydro Pump, as well as Hyper Beam. So overall, Starmie is used over Alakazam due to its versatility, making it very unpredictable as a lead. Lastly, we have Alakazam. Alakazam is part of the big 5 leads, but it is the worst lead out of them all, because it has horrible matchups into every other lead except for Alakazam. Especially against Jinx, it does not do well. And it's also not that good at Welling Gengar if it's put to sleep. What really does make Executor stand out is its combination of sleep power, but it's also able to run Stun Spore at the same time, which means it can put something to sleep and spread paralysis. It also has Explosion, very strong move. It has that Step Psychic. It also has Mega Drain, which allows it to hit Starmie for good damage, as well as Pokemon like Rhydon and Golem. But that's really it. It's the worst lead out of them all, but it's still a Pokemon you have to prepare for. Jolteon should also get a honorable mention. Of course, aside from the 5 leads we just mentioned, there are other Pokemon you can use in that lead slot, but those are very rare, and the best alternate lead would be Jolteon due to its high speed and high special stat, and its electric typing. It can spread paralysis just like Starmie and Alakazam. However, it can threaten Starmie with Thunderbolt, and with Pin Missile it can threaten Executor leads. Jolteon also works well with Executor because Jolteon does force a Rhydon or Golem switch, which you can use to get Executor on the field and safely get off a sleep. However, Jolteon does struggle against other leads due to its low bulk, and it's not the greatest Pokemon to absorb sleep either. But with Starmie being a good lead, Jolteon is not a bad choice. GSC OU has something called the lead cycle, which is quite interesting because how it works is that it commonly had 3 kinds of leads, which were Zapdos and Raikou, aka the Electrics, Cloyster and Snorlax. Cloyster wants to lead to get up a spike as soon as possible. However, it gets forced out by both Zapdos and Raikou. Now, Snorlax has a great matchup against both those Pokemon, but Cloyster has a great matchup against most Snorlax leads because it can get up a spike for free. Start off with Cloyster, it's just very straightforward. It sets spikes. Cloyster is one of the best Pokemon in the metagame because it's by far the best spike setter. Getting up a spike early in the game is very beneficial for that extra chip damage. It has Surf. Surf is a great move to deal with not only spinners like Fortress and Golem, but also numerous ground types like the aforementioned Golems, Steelix, Marowak, Rhydon, even Tyranitar as well. It also has a relatively fast Explosion, which is still very powerful in this generation, even more powerful in this generation with the effectively 500 base power move. Toxic is also a great option to add even more residual damage on top of the spikes, but also cripple important checks like Starmie and Snorlax on switching. Next up we got Zapdos, another great and common lead in the Gen 2 OU metagame. It's a great counter lead to Cloyster, probably the most important reason to use this Pokemon as a lead. It's a great lead for many reasons. It's very strong offensively, very fast, and it also has great bulk on top of that. There are a few ways you can use this Pokemon. If you lead it against a Cloyster, for example, you're already in a great position. You can threaten a Pokemon with Thunder, which has great base power, good chance to paralyze, and you have Hidden Power Ice to hit ground types. So if you lead against a Cloyster, you either force in their ground type, giving you a look at what their ground type is, or you hit a Snorlax, for example, with a Thunder and get a chance to paralyze that. On top of that, the Zapdos can also go for a Phaser set with Whirlwind. This allows you to phase out the Pokemon that they will switch into your Zapdos, which gives you a huge advantage, as you will probably be able to tell the already three Pokemon that your opponent is using. Next up we got Raikou, another great Pokemon and common lead in the metagame. It's quite similar to Zapdos, but it does have some notable differences. First of all, it's mono electric typing, higher speed and higher special defense. This makes it better at handling special Pokemon like Gengar, Jinx, and also opposing Zapdos. Raikou is also significantly faster than Zapdos, but mostly it does do the same things as a lead. You threaten Cloyster, you have Thunder, then hit a Power Ice combo, as well as Rest Talk. Raikou can also use a Phaser set with Roar instead of Whirlwind. It's quite similar to Zapdos. I do not have a lot to add here aside from what I've already mentioned. So we got the king of Gen 2 OEM himself, Snorlax. Snorlax is a great counter lead to both Zapdos and Raikou thanks to its very high HP and high special defense stat. And it can do a lot of things as a lead due to how versatile this Pokemon is. Of course, it does lose a bit against Cloyster leads. There's one way to get around that. You can bait Cloyster to set down spikes and hit it with Double Edge and hit it with a Thunder afterwards. If you're lucky, this will KO the Cloyster immediately, so the only thing you would have to do is get off those spikes and those will be gone forever. Another thing Snorlax can do is Lovely Kiss and put something to sleep early on in the game. Snorlax can also go for Curse. If you use Curse early on, you will be able to scout out your opponent's team, probably like 2 or 3 Pokemon, as they are forced to switch to something to deal with it. Snorlax can also use Body Slam to spread paralysis early on in the game, or even use Self-Destruct to do a lot of damage to opposing Snorlax in the mirror match. It can even go as far as using Toxic and spreading status that way. Snorlax is just very versatile as a lead, and it checks a lot of things. Nidoking is another lead that should be mentioned thanks to its great matchup against the other leads we just talked about. It has Earthquake to capitalize on the Raikou and threaten it. It has Ice Beam to threaten Zapdos. It has Lovely Kiss to threaten a Sleep, and it also outspeeds Snorlax naturally, being able to threaten that Pokemon. It can threaten Cloyster as well with a Thunder, as it does outspeed. So this is a great counter lead against most leads in the metagame. Thief is also a very interesting move on this Pokemon. You would forgo your own leftovers and use this Pokemon to steal opposing leftovers early on and deny them that passive recovery. Aside from those leads, I quickly want to go over Executor and Jinx because I do think they deserve a mention. Executor is a great lead to spread sleep early on, has a good matchup against the electric types, can do massive damage to Snorlax with Explosion, and it can also threaten Cloyster with a Giga Train. So this Pokemon is also a good lead, was also used fairly often in tournaments. Executor can also use Thief to get rid of leftovers early on. Jinx is another sleep lead, very similar to Gen 1. You got Lovely Kiss, Ice Beam instead of Blizzard this time. It is a great lead against Zapdos. Jinx can also threaten Cloyster with Psychic and threaten Snorlax by putting it to sleep. While it doesn't directly threaten it with damage, being able to put Snorlax to sleep early is quite an advantage as well. There are also more niche options like Tyranitar, Fortress and Smeargle, but like I said, they are quite niche, so I'm not gonna go into detail into those Pokemon. ADVOU actually has a lot of leads you can use. There's an article on the Smeargle forums, which I will link down below, from 2019. It has a lot of stats with lead usage stats, lead viability rankings, lead roles, lead matchup matrix. There's a lot here. I'm mainly just gonna focus on 6 Pokemon though, those being the Pokemon in the S rank, as well as Skarmory and Suicune, since those are considered the best leads overall. Tyranitar has many qualities that make it a great Pokemon as a lead. The most important, scent. It's just as simple as that. I mean, scent is a very defining aspect of Gen 3 OU. Leading T-Tar will get that scent up immediately, which is very important to negate passive healing from leftovers. Even if you lead into a Suicune, for example, which you will most likely not be able to beat, even though you have to switch out, you're still negating the leftovers recovery from that Suicune, which is very important. Tyranitar is also the only lead out of these big 6 right here that is able to beat Zapdos leads. Zapdos is very good into every other lead on this list, so leading T-Tar will allow you to beat the Zapdos. Tyranitar also has unmatched versatility, which means your opponent has to be wary when you lead this Pokemon. You cannot just assume it's one set. Tyranitar has so many sets. You have Fast Dragon Dance right here, you have Bulky Dragon Dance, you have Bulky Physical Attacker, you have Pursuit Trapper, you have a Mix set, you have a Choice Band set. Your opponent has to be wary and scout out what your Tyranitar is gonna do. Zapdos is another common lead in the metagame. Like I mentioned earlier, Zapdos is able to force out most of the leads aside from Tyranitar. And this Pokemon is super versatile. It can do a lot of things in the lead slot. You can spread paralysis or go full of the on-fast with your Thunderbolt, Hidden Power Grass or Hidden Power Ice. You can ward the opponent. You can also go for a more bulky set with Rest and spread Toxic. You can go for an Agility plus Baton Pass and boost stats to your teammates. You can also go for a mixed attacking set. I don't know what to say about Zapdos. Is just so good as a lead because it does so many things, forces out common leads as well. It's very important against a Skarmory lead because you deny them the spikes turn 1, which is just amazing. I don't know what to say. This Pokemon is just great as a lead. Salamence is another great and common lead in the Gen 3 OU metagame due to how threatening this Pokemon is, especially initially. Salamence is very difficult to switch into when you don't know its set, and you will only be able to reveal that set after the first turn of the battle once it has actually done something. It can either run a Choice Band set or a Mix set. If you're running Mix set, you have a great matchup and able to threaten Tyranitar, Metagross, and Skarmory leads with Fire Blast and Brick Break. With Choice Band sets, you can also threaten Tyranitar leads as well as Zapdos leads. You can also threaten Metagross leads fairly well. The thing with Salamence is that if Sand is up turn 1, it will reveal the set quite easily because you're either gonna see the leftovers recovery or not. And if you are leading the wrong set against a lead, you can be in a pretty tough position. Metagross is a scary lead to go up against due to the raw power it possesses. Although I do think that out of all of these Pokemon, this is the riskiest Pokemon to use as a lead. If you use a Choice Band, for example, you can do like massive damage to a lot of these Pokemon here. You KO Tyranitar with Meteor Mash, you can KO Zapdos with Rock Slide, same for Salamence. You can do a lot of damage to Suicune with Explosion. To any of these Pokemon really. I think it can even one-hit kill Skarmory. So like it's a threatening Pokemon, but if you do lock yourself into the wrong move, for example, if you Meteor Mash on a Magneton switch in, Rock Slide on a Doctora switch in, you're kind of in a bad position. Zapdos especially can easily use Substitute or Protect to scout out your Choice Band Magneton, or Metagross I mean. So that's why it's not the greatest matchup into that Pokemon either. Explosion can also be outplayed. However, on offensive teams, getting Explosion early on can be quite beneficial. Metagross doesn't have to run a Choice Band set, of course. You can also run a Bulky Attacker set. Does lose some of the immediate power, does make it a great defensive Pokemon, and still has the Explosion. However, you can still pair this with a Pokemon like Magneton, for example. So Skarmory leads do still have to be wary of the Metagross lead, even though you're not running Choice Band. Mixed Attacker is also a great option. Mixed Attacker sets give you more power against physical walls that might want to come in to Metagross. Overall though, Metagross, like I said, I think it's a high risk, high reward lead. Forces a lot of switches, but you can be outplayed, which can leave you in a bad position. You can, however, take advantage of those potential switches and pivot to something of your own. Next up we got Skarmory. This has gotta be the most straightforward lead out of them all. You set spikes. It's just like Gen 2 Cloyster. You set up spikes as early as possible on the field. You have two sets. You have like the offensive spike set. This allows you to outspeed a Magneton potentially switching in. A modest Magneton. And hit it with a hidden power ground, which will do massive damage. Drill Peck also deals quite some significant damage to potential switches like Gengar, for example. You got Taunt to prevent opposing Pokemon like another Skarmory, for example, setting up their own spikes. You have to also have the standard spike set. With Roar, you'll make sure that opposing Pokemon like a Suicune lead or maybe a Dragon Dance Tyranitar lead will not be able to set up freely on your Skarmory. You have Toxic to apply more residual damage, Protect to scout out opposing leads and the sets they might be running. Like I said, Skarmory is very straightforward. You just set up spikes. Last but not least, we got Suicune. It basically does one of two things. It either goes full on offense or defense. Kind of depends what kind of team you're running. But on the defensive set, it will usually be able to tank a few hits, maybe apply some damage with Surf, and scout out your opponent's team using Roar and facing them out. On the offensive set, you would usually have something like this, and also Roar out your opponent or apply some immediate pressure. Substitute sets are all plenty viable as well, but you have to watch out for opposing Pokemon using Roar, of course. And the matchup into Zapdos is not very great. Aside from that, Suicune has a very good matchup against most leads. So with Surf, it can easily force out Tyranitar leads, for example. With Ice Beam, you can threaten Salamence leads. With Substitute or Protect, you can scout out Metagross leads and kind of force them out as well. You can also apply damage to Skarmory leads. So this Pokemon, it is just overall has a great matchup against most other leads. And it is not a easy Pokemon to deal with too. So we are at Gen 4 OU right now. This is the last generation where dedicated leads were a thing. But it changed quite a bit compared to the other generations because of the move Stealth Rock being introduced. And I would say that this metagame in the lead slot, it is quite diverse. Here you can see all the stats from SPL from last year, one of the biggest Pokémon tournaments. These are the lead usage stats of the tournament. I don't have them from this year because the tournament is still going on, so we don't have the overall usage stat right now. So we're gonna focus on those from last year. Let's start off with Jirachi, one of the most used leads last year in SPL. It's a very common lead for a reason. It just threatens a lot of leads in the metagame in general, but it also can do a lot of things in the lead slot and has great set diversity, and most of those sets are very good in that lead slot. For example, with Iron Head, you can threaten leads like Tyranitar or an offensive Latias. You can start spreading paralysis with Body Slam as well. You can use Stealth Rock if you use it on this Pokemon. You can set up Stealth Rock at the start of the game. With Fire Punch, you can also spread Burn early on. Of course, the chances of getting a Burn are lower than a Paralysis or a Flinch, for example, but it still can be very beneficial. As a mixed attacker, it can hit most Pokemon in the tier for very good damage due to its wide coverage options, which also makes this set a great lead option too. Choice Scarf Dresser also makes for a great lead because of the Iron Hand flinch. You can flinch down failure leads like Azelf and Aerodactyl and stop them from getting up Stealth Rock early on in the game. You also have Trick to cripple a potential switch in as well. Zapdos also has some sets it can use as a lead. First we got the Subaru set. This set can set up a substitute quite easy against other leads like Metagross, for example, Hippowdon, Roserade, and even Azelf. Even if you have Toxic on this Pokemon, you can use it early on an Hippowdon lead and catch that Pokemon off guard while it tries to set up Stealth Rock. You can also use Choice Specs as a lead and even use Sleep Talk on this Pokemon. If you use Sleep Talk, you can stay in on sleepers like Roserade and Breloom very easy. Choice Specs Zapdos is capable of one-hit KOing quite some leads like Azelf, for example, if it's not running Focus Sash, of course, Skarmory too, Gyarados, and Lumberry Metagross. It also does significant damage to other Pokemon like Heatran, Jirachi, and also Swampert. And it can force out leads like Gliscor, Dragonite, the aforementioned Gyarados, and Flygon, with most of those Pokemon fearing a hidden power Ice, which you can take advantage of by using U-turn and getting the offensive momentum back. Lastly, it can use the specially defensive set, giving it an easier time against specially attacking leads like Empoleon, Heatran, even Dragonite, while also still having the type advantage against Pokemon like Jirachi and Metagross. Next up we got Azelf, probably the most iconic lead of all time, I would say, especially in Gen 4. I think this is where really the unaliving yourself leads really started to pop up. This Pokemon specifically, with Azelf's incredible speed and also great offensive stats. It can outspeed a lot of Pokemon in the metagame, get up Stealth Rock very early on, use Stunt to prevent other leads from getting up their Stealth Rock or Spikes, use Thunder Wave to cripple any other Pokemon as well, and use Explosion to not only deal a lot of damage, but also keep up the offensive pressure and get another teammate on the field. Of course, Focus Sash was introduced in this generation, so this Pokemon cannot die in one hit unless it's using another item, I suppose. Azelf is a very common lead on hyper offensive team styles for this reason. This is like a very common standard lead set. Another set you can use to lead is Choice Band. This takes quite a different approach to the Stealth Rock heavy set. You can use a Choice Band Explosion on the first turn and get a surprise KO on something like a Metagross, for example, or Bronzong. The standard lead set is so much more common that your opponent will probably not be expecting it. The other options are really here if you predict something, a specific Pokemon switching. Zen Build is just Step, and Coverage U-turn is to get more offensive momentum, and Trick to cripple any Pokemon. Set is really used as anti-lead. Another lead is the utility Rain lead. This allows you to get up Rain Dance early on in the game, which can be beneficial for Rain Pokemon like Kingdra, for example. It's also very nice is that you cannot tell if this Pokemon is using the Rain set or the standard set, which means you can get up Stealth Rock early and also Rain Dance, which your opponent might not be expecting. Next up we got Skarmory, also returning from Gen 3 as a lead. It's literally the same thing. Spikes. You can use a specially defensive set, and with this set there are not a lot of Pokemon that can stop this Pokemon from at least getting up one layer of spikes. You can also use the offensive Spiker set from Generation 3, although it's slightly different, of course. It works a little similar to Azelf. You can use Taunt to prevent other leads from getting up their hazards, but this Pokemon has both access to Spikes and Stealth Rock, which gives it a niche over Azelf as like a fast offensive lead. So you're gonna get up both of those hazards. Of course, you want to get up Stealth Rock first and as many layers of spikes as you can after you get up those rocks, because those are the most important. It can either use a Lumberry or a Focus Sash in that item slot. It really depends on what leads you want to be able to set up your hazards, so it's really personal preference. Heatran is another Stealth Rock lead, but it's a more aggressive one. It can either set up Stealth Rock or threaten Pokemon with a Fire Blast or Earth Power, or with a very strong Explosion as well. You can even use Taunt to get up or to prevent your opponent from getting up their hazards. Will-O-Wisp is another option to cripple a physical attacker or any Pokemon for that matter by burning them. Due to Heatran's versatility, it can be very difficult for the opponent to find out what Heatran might be running in that lead slot. Some might even expect a Choice Specs, for example, which can give you a surprise factor when getting up the Stealth Rocks, or they might not use Taunt on you due to thinking you are Choice Specs or something else. You can also use a substitute set and set up a sub on any Pokemon that you have a lead advantage against, like Skarmory, for example. Lastly, you can also use Choice Specs in the lead slot and deal a lot of damage to any Pokemon that might lead against you with a Specs Overheat or even Eruption. It's really just personal preference. Almost forgot about Choice Scarf too. You can use these to outspeed leads that might think they're faster than you, like Azelf, for example, and get them off the field quicker. It's really personal preference whether you want Choice Scarf or Choice Specs in that case, or one of the others that we just mentioned, but Heatran overall is just a great lead. Lastly, we got Latias, which is out of these 6 Pokemon, the most straightforward lead. You deal a lot of damage with Choice Specs. You can 1-hit KO or 2-hit KO a lot of the leads too. You can cripple them with Trick. Another very niche, but what I think is a very cool option. You can use Trick with Flame Orb and trick it to, where's the Flamer? You can trick it to a physical attacker like a Metagross, for example, and get them burned very early on and cripple them from the get-go, which can be extremely beneficial if it is a Pokemon that's very threatening to your team. But that's really it all for Latios. It's just a choice spec. It just uses choice specs in its lead slot. That's really it. Alright, we had Gen 5 OU right now. This is the first metagame with team preview. So the whole lead metagame is kind of a thing of the past. You can basically use any Pokemon as a lead. Of course, there are some better than others. However, you do still have some dedicated leads, most commonly seen on hyper offensive teams. We're gonna focus on those Pokemon that are still used as a dedicated lead from now on. I'm gonna start off with Terrakion. It's a great lead due to how fast it is and also how strong this Pokemon is. It can threaten a lot of Pokemon and force switches due to its strong stab moves. Terrakion is also one of the only leads that threatens common weather and entry hazard setting leads. With Taunt, it can prevent opposing Pokemon from setting up their own hazards and also to stop setup sweepers that might try to use it for setup fodder. Terrakion is also a lead that can beat a common spinner, this being Fortress, and it can beat Magic Bounce users such as Espeon and Xatu, which are often used on Sun teams to prevent hazards from going up, and Stealth Rock is very deadly to those Sun teams, and Terrakion is also one of the only Pokemon that matches up very well against Sun teams. Aerodactyl is a more niche lead in the OU metagame in this generation, but it still has its uses over the other Stealth Rock setters. It's one of the fastest Pokemon in the OU tier, and is able to outspeed the other leads, so it can consistently get up Stealth Rock on the field. It also has Taunt, just like Terrakion, to prevent opposing leads from getting up their Stealth Rock or using it as setup fodder. However, like I said, it's more niche and it faces competition for both Garchomp, Terrakion, and also Landorus Steed, because those Pokemon do have more defensive utility and offensive pressure. But this Pokemon is still good. Garchomp is a very offensive Stealth Rock lead. It's a great Stealth Rock setter due to its 102 speed, being able to outspeed that 100 base benchmark, and having a good matchup against other leads like Jirachi, and threatening spinners like Excadrill and Starmie with its powerful Outrage and Earthquake. Outrage is also great to wear down other Pokemon early on in the game, like the aforementioned Starmie, Breloom, Rotom Watch, and Runiculus, and also Landorus Steed. Swords Dance allows Garchomp to get even stronger if it does get a free Stealth Rock turn. It can get up a Swords Dance as well and get off a lot of damage before it goes down, and hard punishing the aforementioned Pokemon and also punishing steel types like Ferrothorn. Next up we got Landorus Steed. This Pokemon can also get up Stealth Rock early on and is great on hyper offensive teams. Explosion is a great option to let Landorus wear down Pokemon that may try to take it out after setting up Stealth Rock like Keldeo, Gliscor, and also Latios, while also maintaining the offensive momentum. Imprison is a nice option and a very unique one, because it prevents slower Stealth Rock leads from getting up Stealth Rock and also stops opposing Landorus Steed if it wins the speed type. Skarmory is back again as a lead, can nearly always set up Stealth Rock or Spikes, oftentimes even both, thanks to Sturdy and also using the Gustet Berry, which will allow it to move first when it is at 25% of its HP or less. It also has Brave Bird to chip down opposing leads, and that chip can be quite beneficial for its teammates to break through those Pokemon later on. Brave Bird also stops rapid spinners, slower rapid spinners, from rapid spinning the hazards, because Brave Bird can allow Skarmory to die from recall before they can get the rapid spin off. Taunt is also there to prevent slower leads from getting up their entry hazards and giving the offensive teammates that want to come in after a better opportunity to set up and start his sweep. Jirachi is a great Stealth Rock user, as this basically possible to one-hit KO thanks to the numerous resistances and also being able to use Sugar Berry to shrug off incoming ground attacks. Thunder and Icy Wind also give it that great Bolt Beam coverage. And with Icy Wind, thanks to the speed drop, it can 2-hit KO Landorus and Gliscor, whilst keeping setup sweepers like Dragon Dance, Dragonite in check. Thunder is usually used over Thunderbolt due to its higher power, great paralysis chance, and also rain teams being quite common, so it has that 100% accuracy. And this can allow it to threaten not only Politoed, but also other Pokemon like Satu for example, and one-hit KO them. It can also use Energy Ball to destroy Pokemon like Gastrodon, Seismitoad and Rotom Wash, and also even Mamoswine. And U-turn can be used to escape Pokemon like Magnezone that might not trap it, but also get off a slow pivot and send in another teammate without them taking damage. Iron Head's also still an option to use Jirachi Power Flinching ability and do more damage to Pokemon like Tyranitar and Runiculus and Defensive Breloom. We're moving on to Gen 6 OU, where once again we got Aerodactyl as a lead in this generation as well. It kind of does the same thing, with the move slot at least. You have Stealth Rock of course, you have Taunt to prevent opposing leads from getting their hazards up. Earthquake is able to threaten Excadrill, which is a very common Pokemon in this generation and would like to rapid spin those hazards away. It also threatens Heatran. Double Edge allows Aerodactyl to sacrifice itself from recall damage. You can also use Defog, which is a great option maybe in the later game if you really need to get hazards off your side. You can even use Iron Head. Iron Head allows you to hit Mega Diancie, which can otherwise use Magic Bounce to prevent you from getting up the Stealth Rock, and this allows you to one-hit KO that Pokemon instead of Earthquake, where it would be a 2-hit KO. This set allows you to survive counter leads like Mega Lompany, which is a very common counter lead as it can use Fake Out and High Jump Kick after to potentially score a KO. But with Rocky Helmet and the maximum defense investment, you will be able to live that and also deal significant chip damage to it back. Next up we got Azelf, also back from Generation 4. Also using, it's quite similar to its Generation 4 version, but with some differences. The move slot, you got Stealth Rock Explosion of course, you got Taunt, into detail about these moves. Skill Swap however is new. This allows you to swap your ability with Magic Bounce users that might try to prevent you from getting up that Stealth Rock. So that is a very great option for this Pokemon. It also uses quite a lot of defensive EVs for the same reason as Aerodactyl. It allows you to survive Fake Out from Mega Lompany followed by Return, so you can still get Stealth Rock against that anti-lead. Next up we got Shuckle. Its main niche is setting up Sticky Web to support its teammates, but it's also able to set up Stealth Rock as well. But the priority really is on Sticky Web. This Pokemon is super bulky and with sturdy, it is impossible to one-hit KO this Pokemon, and with Mental Herb you can shrug off taunts from opposing leads that might want to prevent you from getting up those hazards. And Shuckle is very susceptible to taunt due to how slow this is. You also can use Infestation to rack up chip damage and trap opposing Pokemon that might not have a favorable matchup against Shuckle. And Encore is there to prevent opposing Pokemon from using Shuckle as setup fodder, and also being able to lock them into an unfavorable move like a Substitute or maybe a hazard as well. Shuckle also has more niche options you can use like Toxic instead of Infestation, or you can even use Knockoff, allowing you to cripple Pokemon like Heatran or Chansey early on in the game, and they might not expect it since it's quite a niche option on Shuckle. Next up we got Superior. It is a very good screen setter, something different from the usual hazard leads we have seen. Due to its high speed, it can get up Reflect and Light Screen quite easy. It also has Taunt to prevent slower leads from getting up hazards or using Defog to get rid of the screens, and it can also prevent setup sweepers from setting up. You can also use Glare in this slot to paralyze something, but Taunt is really preferred to stop Defog. And you have Leaf Storm here. With Contrary, Superior can rack up quite a lot of damage, and you kind of want this because otherwise this Pokemon is way too passive. Landorus is also back from Generation 5 as a suicide lead. Oh, I already explained this Pokemon. It literally does the same thing, so I just wanted to mention it anyway because it is still used. Lastly we got Mew. Really does the same thing as most of the other leads. Sets up Stealth Rock, has Taunt to prevent other leads from getting up. their hazards. It can also use Thunder Wave or Will-O-Wisp to cripple a Pokemon early on, and Explosion to get itself off the field and let in a teammate. For item slots, you can use a Mental Herb to shrug off taunts, because Mew is quite difficult to one-hit KO. However, you can also go for a Colbur Berry. This allows you to survive knockoff from faster leads like Weavile that might try to one-hit KO you. So it's really personal preference. Moving on to Generation 7. Guess who's back? Back again. It's Landorus. Landorus out here setting up Stealth Rock yet again. Earthquake, of course, to not only deal massive damage to most Pokemon, but also hit Pokemon like Heatran and Excadrill that also can set up Stealth Rock. Rock Tomb allows you to hit faster defalkers like Zapdos and Tornadus and chip them down, while also lowering their speed stat, allowing you to outspeed them and set up Stealth Rock against them anyway. Explosion, I don't really have to explain that move. You can also forgo Rock Tomb or Explosion for Imprison. You can also use Hidden Power Ice to hit opposing Landorus, Gliscor and Garchomp. Or you can go for U-Turn, allowing you to safely pivot out against a forced switch and get in a teammate. Next up we got Excadrill. Excadrill allows it to set itself apart from Landorus as a lead because of the ability Mold Breaker, allowing it to be able to get up Stealth Rock against Magic Bounce users like Mega Sableye and Mega Diancie, while also having access to Rapid Spin, allowing it to keep hazards off on its own side. And you can use Toxic to cripple a switch in, or also use Rock Tomb just like Landorus. Alolan Ninetales has a very unique niche as a screensider thanks to its combination of Snow Warning and Aurora Veil, while also being very fast, allowing it to get up both Reflect and Light Screen basically in one turn instead of the usual 2 turns, while also only using one move slot. 2 Freeze Dry gives it a great matchup against rain teams that are kind of a pain in the ass for these kinds of team styles, allowing you to hit Pelipper, Swampert and Kingdra for 4 times super effective damage. Encore is a great utility option to pressure defensive Pokemon and also slower setup sweepers. You could also use Hypnosis, which is a more inconsistent option, which I cannot even find right now. Where is Hypnosis at? Well, guess we'll never know. It's probably in the useless move slot thingy things. But Hypnosis is also an option to put on more pressure immediately, but like I said, it's more inconsistent. Heal is a great option against Pokemon like Mega Charizard Y and Tyranitar that want to try and switch the weather to sun or sand respectively. This allows you to still get up the hill and get up the Aurora Veil anyway. Next up, guess who's back again? Mew. I mean, I just talked about Mew. I'm not gonna talk about Mew again. But it's using Ice Beam now because Landorus is so common, and Garchomp and Gliscor are also common Pokemon. Yeah. Next up we got for Bombay, a great sticky web setter thanks to its amazing speed stat and also its Shield Dust ability, which prevents secondary effects from Pokemon's moves to take place. This allows it to not only outspeed Pokemon like Mega Medicham, but also render itself immune to Mega Lomply's Fake Out, which is a very common anti-lead. You also have Stun Spore to cripple opposing Pokemon, and thanks to its passable special attack stat and stat Moonblast, it's not as passive as most leads. However, as it does struggle against Pokemon like Heatran and Tornadus that can either defog the hazards or get up Stealth Rock against it. Lastly, we got another sticky web setter, a Requinit. This Pokemon, while it is significantly slower than Ribombay, it does set itself apart due to liquidation boosted by Water Bubble, which allows to one-hit KO Pokemon like Mega Diancie, which could otherwise block Sticky Web. It also has a Magic Code, which allows it to bounce back hazards like Stealth Rock, which could also easily be set up against this Pokemon. Also moves like Taunt, which I reckon it is very susceptible against. Hidden Power Fire is there to threaten Pokemon like Ferrothorn and Kartana. It could also use Mirror Coat in this slot as a niche option against especially oriented Pokemon. And also Toxic to pressure defoggers like Mantine and Zapdos and Mew. So we're moving on to Generation 8. And there's honestly not a lot of new things to say that have not been mentioned before. In Gen 8, hyper offensive teams are not very common and they are usable. This is mainly because of the introduction of heavy duty boots, which just makes these teams far too inconsistent. It makes team structures like Stick Web basically obsolete, and hazards just don't have that much of an impact anymore, and hyper offensive teams kind of revolve around setting up hazards and keeping up the pressure by forcing switches. But yeah, with Pokemon like Zapdos, Tornadus Therian, just using heavy duty boots, and bulkier teams being more common, Regenerator cores being more common, hyper offensive teams are just not used a lot anymore. And there are, as a result, not a lot of dedicated leads for those kinds of teams. The only leads that are kind of used, at least to my knowledge, maybe there are some very niche ones, but I don't think those are worth mentioning anyway. I mean, if you want to use a lead, you go for Mew. Mew is here again. Ninetales, Alolan, Landorus Therian. It's the same leads we have already mentioned. I guess if you really want to go and use Sticky Web too, although it's very unreliable, you could, I suppose, use Rabambe. But like I said, hyper offensive teams not very common. And talking about leads, there are no new leads to mention here. Alright, we're almost done. We're at Gen 9 right now. Got some new interesting leads to talk about, unlike Gen 8. First of all, Glimmora, one of the tier's premier leads, thanks to its ability to set up Stealth Rock, while also being able to deny opposing leads from getting up their hazards with Mortal Spin. It can also scare away physical attackers with its ability Toxic Debris, which will set up Toxic Spikes on the opponent's side if it is hit by a physical attack, which can be very lethal against certain teams, especially offensive ones, since offensive poison types are not very common, except for Iron Moth. Mortal Spin also being able to poison Pokemon deters Pokemon like Tinglu from setting up multiple hazards against Glimmora, deters Heatherine from switching in to potentially bounce back Stealth Rock. Power Gem is a great step move to hit most targets for decent damage, notably Pokemon like Corviknight, Skarmory and Gliscor, basically flying types that could otherwise wall Glimmora. Especially Corviknight also having extra defog can make it kind of annoying for this Pokemon to go up against. Earth Power is great coverage, allowing it to hit steel types that can resist, or not even resist, are completely immune against Mortal Spin, and can thus block Glimmora from removing hazards. Focus-S is usually used in the item slot. You can also use Red Guard, which is great to disrupt the opposing team, potentially forcing a Pokemon to take Stealth Rock or Toxic Spike damage when switching out. And lastly, Terra Ghost is basically the only Terra you would use on this Pokemon to prevent Pokemon like Great Tusk and Iron Threats from removing hazards. Usually you don't want to waste your Terra on this, but if you really want to keep those hazards up, and they can be a very significant difference between them being up or off, it can be worth to use your Terra on this. Next up we got Samurott Hisuian, a top tier dedicated lead, thanks to its signature move Ceaseless Edge, letting it not only deal good damage to Pokemon, but also being able to set up spikes in the process, being able to bypass common entry hazard prevention such as Heatherine's Magic Bounce and Taunt from Deoxys Speed and Landorus Therian. And this is great to keep up that offensive pressure, especially with this move being boosted by its ability Sharpness, basically giving it a 50% damage boost. Its step combination is also great as an offensive type. Dark and Water can hit most of the tier for neutral damage, and it also has great water options like Razor Shell and Aqua Cutter that also get the boost from sharpness. It has Aqua Jet or Sucker Punch for priority, and Knockoff for even more utility in that last slot. Araquanid is actually the tier's premier sticky web user due to its great defensive typing, good bulk, and amazing offensive matchup, notably against threats to sticky web teams such as Iron Moth, Cinderace, Iron Threats, and Great Tusk thanks to its Water Bubble ability. Surf is a consistent step option for reliable damage, but also prevents Glimmora from setting up toxic spikes with its ability Toxic Debris, and is better against Lander's Styrian leads that might try to use Taunt on Araquanid. With Endeavor, Araquanid can chip down notable water type checks like Ogerpon Wellspring and Primarina, and using Custom Berry allows Araquanid to deal surprise damage to threatening sweepers like Curum before being KO'd. Endure is here to consistently be able to activate that Custom Berry. You can also use Mirror Coat to surprise KO Pokemon like Raging Bolt, which might try to lead off against this Pokemon. And with the right spread, you can actually survive a electric attack from Raging Bolt. Bombay is also a very consistent lead sticky web setter thanks to its great speed tier, and also having Step Moonblast being able to punish spinners like Great Tusk. Stun Spore is a great utility option to cripple faster threats like Darkrai, for example, and set up sticky web next turn. Psychic Noise is able to threaten Glimmora, while also having the utility to neutralize recovery from Pokemon like Clodsire and Blissey. Psychic Noise is also great against Substitute Iron Moth, which could otherwise easily use Ribombay for setup fodder, and Psychic Noise of course goes through Substitute, if I'm not mistaken. Skill Swap is an alternative option, allowing Ribombay to steal Magic Bounce from Hatterene that might want to switch in, though it's a very niche option. And it can also help against Gliscor's Poison Heal, being able to surprise Gliscor by suddenly getting a lot of damage from Toxic. Shield Dust is also not a bad ability, as it is able to ignore secondary effects from moves like Sludge Bomb from Galarian Slowking and Flamethrower from Moltres, which means Ribombay will usually have 2 turns to do something. Iron Threats is another great lead in Gen 9 OU, thanks to its incredible speed stat paired with booster energy, giving it an additional speed boost when it enters the field. You have Stealth Rock on this Pokemon, and also Rapid Spin to prevent other hazard leads like Deoxys, Speed, and Glimmora from getting up their hazards. Its Steel typing also blocks Mortal Spin from Glimmora, and it is naturally faster than Lander's Styrian, which could otherwise use Taunt on it. A special set is preferred because Earth Power can KO Glimmora without triggering Toxic Debris, and Steel Beam is a great option to allow Iron Threats to chip itself down to prevent Pokemon like Great Tusk and Corviknight from potentially removing hazards. Steel Beam also deals significant damage to Great Tusk thanks to its lower special defense stat, and it also deals significant damage to Hatterene, which could also otherwise try to block Stealth Rock from going up. And not to mention giving a teammate safe entry on the field. Alternative options are Volt Switch or using a knockoff for added utility. Lastly, we got Deoxys Speed, the second fastest Stealth Rock user after Booster Energy Iron Threats. It has great utility options that make it a lead to consider. Psychic Noise is there to prevent recovery from Pokemon like Gliscor, Clefable, and Corviknight, and deals heavy damage to Great Tusk and Glimmora. Knockoff cripples defensive Pokemon like Ting-Lu and Galarian Slowking, and Superpower can 2-hit KO Pokemon like Hisuian Samurott and Darkrai, while also threatening King Gambit. Alternatively, it can use Taunt. Deoxys can also use a dual screen set, and it is one of the better screen setters in the metagame, thanks to its, of course, great speed set like we already mentioned, and also having Taunt in its arsenal. Psycho Boost is usually used in this last slot to not make this Pokemon super passive and have some sort of offensive pressure against Pokemon like Glimmora and neutral Pokemon like Tontoso. We finally made it through every generation and the leads that are used in those generations. So if you enjoyed the video, consider liking the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.